Hello and welcome back to the kitchen. Today we're going to make a focaccia bread, something that someone requested, and also we're getting together with family today. My job was to make bread today, so I said why not do something different. Focaccia bread. I've made it before, always a big hit. So I'm making a simple rosemary focaccia bread. For those of you who don't know what it is, focaccia bread is a thin bread that you actually make in a sheet pan, and simple to make and it's really good. So let's get started and then we can talk about it some more. Ingredients: I've got 5 cups of bread flour. I have the equivalent of 1 packet of yeast, which is a little over 2 teaspoons. I've got a tablespoon of sugar, a tablespoon of salt. I have some fresh rosemary from that I just picked from the garden outside, and some olive oil and warm water. I think that's everything. And so let's get started making the focaccia bread. The first thing you have to do is you've got to combine your yeast and water to get the yeast to proof, to get it to come to life, if you will. So that's pretty simple. We're just going to add our yeast and our sugar to the warm. This is a 1 3/4 cup of warm water right out of the tap. You don't want it to be boiling, just warm. You're just going to mix that up. And we're going to let that sit for 10 minutes, let that yeast come to life and proof, and then we're going to put this all together. So we'll be right back. All right, so it's been 10 minutes. You can see the foam all over the top of that yeast. That means the yeast is alive, it's good, and it's taking that sugar and converting it. It's going to work out really well. Again, that's a science thing that I don't understand completely about it, but I know that the yeast is converting the sugar, and this is what makes the dough rise, and it's all fantastic. So I'm going to add now to my 5 cups of flour. I'm using bread flour. You can use all-purpose flour, not a problem. I think the bread flour gives it a chewier texture. That's what I like, but you obviously can use all-purpose flour. This is 1 tablespoon of salt. Just going to mix that in with the flour. We're going to put that. I'm going to use my mixer, my KitchenAid mixer. You can absolutely do this by hand if you want to. Me, I'm just going to use my mixer because I think it's a lot easier. So we're just going to add that flour in there. Not all of it made in. Some of it, my wife's giving me a funny look because I did spill some out there. That's okay. It's just a little bit. Right. If I don't make a mess, I'm not cooking. So you got to make a little bit of a mess. So to this mixture, we're going to add put this on low speed. We're going to add our 1 3/4 cups of water, which has the yeast and the sugar in it. We're just going to add that in slowly. And we will get a picture of this. I don't want to miss any of that. I'm just going to make sure I get all this out of there. Okay. And also we're going to add a 1/2 cup of olive oil right in. We're going to let that mix. Let's get a picture. We're going to get you a video of that, but we're going to let this mix until it all comes together and then let it mix for a few minutes. So let's take a look at that. All right, so as you saw in the video, the dough came together, cleaned the sides of the bowl. It's been kneading in there for about 5 minutes. So we're going to shut that off. We're going to transfer it onto our board, just to knead it for another minute or so to get it to come together. I'm going to put a little bit of flour on the board so it doesn't stick. And look at that. Came together beautifully. You know, it's funny, everybody's, I don't want to say anti-bread, but it seems like bread is, the last couple of years, has become like a no-no. Nobody wants to eat bread. Too many carbs. And yes, too much bread is not good, but every once in a while, making some fresh bread at home, there's nothing like it. You know, we all grew up eating bread, sandwiches for lunch every day, we had bread with dinner every night. So we've probably all cut way back compared to what we used to eat as kids. So every once in a while you got to treat yourself. And if you can make homemade bread once in a while, oh, there's nothing like it. The smell in the house, and that bread is warm out of the oven. My wife is looking at me like we are not eating bread every night, so I don't think we're going to start doing this all the time.
I didn't say a word.
But, like I say, treat on the weekends to make a fresh Italian bread, which you can see I have a video out there of just making a nice loaf of Italian bread. If you search on, I guess the YouTube channel, you'll find an episode where I made bread. But this focaccia bread, in focaccia bread, you'll see when it comes out, it's again like a thin sheet bread. And a great thing with that is just to eat it with your meal, but also you cut it and make sandwiches out of it with some fresh prosciutto or mortadella or capricola with some nice provolone or something. Makes a great panino. All right, so you can see the dough now come together. It's starting to look nice and smooth. It's got a great texture to it. So what we're going to do now is this has to rise for about an hour or two, depending on if you have a nice warm area, it'll go a little quicker. All right, but we're going to put this together, put our bottom together, and look at that. Beautiful. Now I've got a bowl, a little bit of olive oil in it, keeps it from sticking. So we're going to just put that bread in there, rub it around, get that olive oil to coat it. All right. We're going to cover this. I'm going to cover this with a damp dish towel. It's not damp yet, but I'll do that after. And we're going to put that in a warm place, and we're going to let it rise for about an hour or so until it doubles. Then we'll come back and put this in the oven. Okay, we are back. Our dough has been rising up for a little over an hour. It's been maybe an hour and a quarter, hour and 20 minutes, which gave me plenty of time to get the grass cut. I went out and picked some beautiful flowers from the yard. And now we're going to get our dough onto the pan where it's going to rise again. So again, we've got, look at that. My wife had to leave for a few minutes, so I'm on my own again, but you can see that dough has doubled in size, which is what you want. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a 12 by 16 baking sheet, cookie sheet. We are going to pour a quarter cup of olive oil right into the pan. And yes, it seems like a lot of olive oil, but that gives you that really crusty bottom. And again, a great olive oil flavor. Now we're going to put our dough right out onto that pan. Get that olive oil moved around a little bit. What we're going to do is we're just going to set this out onto the pan. Oh, if you could feel that, when you it feels so light and soft, you can just tell that it's been it's full of air bubbles now, and it's after it's risen, that's what you want. So now with your hands, we're just going to start stretching this out. Going from the middle and pushing out. We're going to get this to cover the whole pan. And you know, if you've ever bought that dough at the grocery store, pizza dough, it's good for a pinch, but it doesn't spread like this. When you make your own yeast dough, and we're going to do a whole pizza episode. I'm crazy about making homemade pizza. And so we're going to do a whole pizza episode, making a nice Neapolitan pizza. But anyway, I digress. So here, you just keep spreading this out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it once. Right, so we got olive oil on the top and the bottom. Just coat it. There we go. Look at that. All right. Now that we've got it spread out throughout the whole pan, try and get it as even as possible. And when it's going to shrink a little bit probably as it, because we're going to let it rise again. And then what we're going to do is just put some finger imprints in there. Those little pockets are going to hold the olive oil. And we're going to pour a little more olive oil on the end right before we put it in the oven. So what we're going to do now, I think we've done that enough. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wash my hands off. I am going to cut up my fresh rosemary. If you don't have fresh, obviously you can use dried rosemary, but anytime you can get fresh. You know, I have a small, well, I have a pretty good sized garden, but I have herbs in there. I've got some rosemary, some sage, some oregano. While this is rising, I'll try and go out and get a picture of that and show you. And there's nothing like going out in the yard and picking fresh herbs to use in recipes. It really adds, I mean, dried is fine if that's what you've got, but if you can get some fresh, and I may need a little more, so before I put it in the oven, I may go out in the yard and get a little bit more. But we're just going to chop this. I've already washed it too, just so you know, if anybody's wondering. If my family's watching this after they've already eaten it and they say, wait a minute, did you wash that? And now we're just going to sprinkle this over the top. You can smell that rosemary. And see, when I said my wife wasn't here to laugh at me. So now we are going to let this sit and rest, because we upset the glutens there, and we're going to let this rest for another up to an hour, about an hour. Then we're going to put a little more olive oil on it and a little salt, and we're going to put it in the oven, and it's going to be delicious. So we'll be back as soon as this is done resting for about an hour. Okay, so now the dough has been resting in the pan for about an hour, and you can see how puffy it is. It's risen up a little bit. So now we're ready. I forgot to tell you before, while this is rising, put your oven on 425, get that preheated. So while this was out there, I was out there planting in my garden and doing some work. It's a beautiful day outside. And now I also picked a little bit more of the rosemary. I just want to get a little more of that rosemary on there. So I picked a little more fresh rosemary. We're just going to put on the top. And like I said before, if you can get it fresh, it definitely has a much better flavor than the dried, but if you only have the dried, obviously that's fine. Okay, now we're going to take about a half a teaspoon of salt, and we're just going to, this is a coarse kosher salt, just a little bit on there, that saltiness with the rosemary. It's really going to be good. And the last step, what I'm going to do here is I'm just pushing this into the corners a little more. It kind of shrunk a little bit. And all those little pockets you made with your fingers, you don't want to press on it too much now, because now that we've got it to rise, we don't want it to fall back down. You're just going to drizzle about a teaspoon or so of olive oil on the top to go into those little pockets. And that's going to help also make a nice crust on the top. So now we are going to put this in the oven at 425 for about 20 minutes. Right in the center rack of the oven. And when we come back, it'll be all done. So like I was saying before, I went outside while that was rising up to work in the garden. And here you can see a couple pictures of the garden. So I have just some herbs in pots on the wall. I've got basil, I've got rosemary, sage, oregano, and I have some parsley also in the garden. Here in the garden I have eggplant, tomatoes, garlic, a few different kinds of peppers. So later in the summer, when all these things are coming out, we're going to make some great recipes with those herbs and those vegetables. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so that has now been in the oven for 20 minutes at 425. Let's see what it looks like. Oh boy.
Looks good.
So there is our rosemary focaccia bread. Wow. I wish you could smell this. It is, there's nothing like fresh baked bread to smell in the house, but with the rosemary, oh. Now you want to let this cool in the pan for 10 to 15 minutes. Just leave it in the pan on a wire rack, let it cool. And I'm just going to pick up this corner here. Oh wow. Oh, that bottom is beautiful, browned, crispy from all that olive oil they had on the bottom. So anyway, we're going to let this cool, and then we're going to take this, I said we're taking this to my family for a little get-together, a little outdoor get-together, and we cannot wait to cut into this. So, today happens to be, it's Memorial Day weekend, remembering all those service members who lost their lives protecting us. So, salute to that, and to you. I hope you try this recipe. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you're enjoying these videos. And please like, subscribe, click, do all those things. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to see how your bread comes out. And again, until next time, salute.